Hey guys, it is Melissa and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Melissa Ellen and I do these true crime videos. I just put out a video for you guys this morning talking about Lauren Spear. So make sure you check that out. She's been missing since 2011 and we did a whole story on her and we want to keep getting her photo out there. She's never been found and her disappearance is completely mysterious. But today I'm going to tell you a news story. So picture this, 14-year-old runs an ad in the newspaper wanting to get a babysitting job. And a stranger, a male, calls her and asks her if she can take the bus 7 miles away to another city and babysit his 5-year-old. And the parents are like, yeah, that's totally a great idea. Okay, well, let me tell you, this was in 1974. Okay, I'm gonna need you guys to let go of all your thoughts right now that you're thinking. We are not going to blame in any way. Back then, this was totally acceptable, completely normal thing to do. There was no online, there was no easy way to get a hold of people. So this is what people did. And unfortunately, she disappeared and she's never been found. It's been over 45 years and it changed a lot in history about the way that things are handled and about the way that we put our children out there. So I want to tell you the story of Margaret Ellen Fox, who disappeared in 1974 and still has never been found. So let's jump right into the video. Now let me tell you a little bit about Margaret. She also went by Mary, but we're gonna call her Margaret. That's what most of her story is out there. Margaret Ellen Fox. She was born on February 4th of 1960, which means of course she would be 60 years old now. And she was born in Bloomington, New Jersey. She was the only daughter and she had 4 brothers. I did see in one news article from the past that it said 5, but I do believe it was 4. And she was somewhere in the middle of all of those boys. Now, the reason she ran the ad in order to get babysitting jobs is she had just graduated 8th grade and she was going into high school. She wanted a little bit of money in her pocket. She wanted to be able to buy new clothes. She wanted to be able to go and do things and be a girl. Obviously, she's got all these brothers. She's trying to find her way. And that was what some of her brothers explained in later interviews. They also explained her as being an eclectic girl. She was into a lot of different things. During the summers, they would go swimming, they went skiing, they would ride bikes, they would ride horses. In the winter, they were really into ice skating, sledding. So she was into a lot of things. She also took piano lessons. So this was a girl that was really focused and had a lot of hopes and dreams ahead of her. And this comes much later in the story, but I just felt like this explained a lot of who she was because sometimes it's hard to get a lot of these stories. But during her disappearance, she interacted with a woman and the woman described her as having eyes that smiled at you. She was just such a sweet little girl. And she just had this limited little interaction with her and just how sweet she was and how much her eyes just smiled at you. So that's the kind of girl that little Margaret was. Now, I'm going to include below a full description of everything she was wearing and everything we know about her, and I'll also talk about it at the end of the video. But let's talk about how she disappeared. Now, as I explained, she was obviously trying to make some money, okay? So her and her cousin Lynn, and I understand that Lynn just lived a couple of houses down, but Lynn was only 11. So Lynn and Margaret decided they wanted to get babysitting jobs. So what they did is they went to the local paper and they ran an ad. Now, this ad would make you cringe these days because we would get like, why would you do it that way? But remember, we're in 1974, no judgment, things are different. I feel like my very first video I ever made for you guys, by the way, which was on Ted Bundy, and then I kept explaining over and over, things were different back then. And I said it, anyways, you don't play a drinking game to that video because it was bad. I said it way too many times. So anyways, this is totally different. And the ad specifically said, babysitters, experienced teen girls, love kids, watch at your house, call with their phone number, okay? Back in the day, back then, when you would run an ad, you were very limited on the characters. So you would try to put as much valuable information. We're girls, we're teenagers, we love kids, we'll babysit at your house. There's only so many ways you can put this together because you need to put, are you an adult, are you a child? I get it, but I know we all see it and we're like, why did they feel the need to put that they were teen girls? Like, who put that ad? This was absolutely normal verbiage for an ad at the time. So they run this ad, and within a week, Lynn actually gets a phone call from a man who wants to offer her a job to babysit. This man explains that she would have to ride the bus because he is 7 to 8 miles away, technically in another city, but we're not like going very far, but it is technically another city, okay? And so Lynn is only 11, and there's 2 stories of how this was done. Either Lynn's parents just flat out said, no, you're not riding a bus that far, you're 11, or I've also heard that the man was not okay with her being 11. Because if it was a normal person who didn't abduct children, you'd be like, oh, 11's too young to watch my child. I'm looking for someone just a little bit older. And it didn't work. Whatever it is, or he had a preference. We'll get into it. So it doesn't happen with Lynn, but Lynn volunteers her cousin Margaret's phone number, who's a little bit older at the age of 14, and she might be able to do the job. So Margaret ends up getting a phone call, and it's from a man who identifies himself as John Marshall. John says that he lives in the neighboring city of Mount Holly in New Jersey. Now, Margaret and her family live in Burlington. They live on Penn Street in New Jersey. So this city of Mount Holly isn't very far. Again, 7 to 8 miles. You can take a quick bus ride to get there. So he explains that he lives in Mount Holly and he lives in a residential area. He says that him and his wife have a 5-year-old son who they need some daycare services for. He says that he would need somebody to watch the little boy from 9 to 1, Monday through Friday, and then his wife or him would return home and take her back to her house. He offers to pay for her bus money. So this sounds like a really great deal, right? He's also offering $40 a week. That is the equivalent of about $250 right now. A 14-year-old making $250 a week is a huge payment. So Margaret is just, of course, excited about this job. He also explains that they have a nice home with a swimming pool and a jungle gym in the backyard. This is very appealing to her. She could spend her summers swimming in the backyard with this little boy, playing outside, and she's going to make a very good payment for this, and he's going to take care of her bus fare. So this is just sounding like an amazing deal. She talks to her parents, and they do approve this for her. Now, she was supposed to start the job on June 21st, and it ends up that John Marshall, whoever he is, ends up calling back to the house to explain that he needs to reschedule. And he actually ends up talking to Margaret's father. Margaret's father, David, talks to this man and discusses the fact that he needs to reschedule. John Marshall, the man, says that his mother-in-law has passed away, and so he needs to reschedule for the next Monday. And her father said that he didn't get any red flags from this man, that he sounded in his 30s to 40s, and everything seemed to line up. He did not get an address from the man. So they move forward, and she's going to move forward with this position, and she's going to be there on Monday, June 24th. She's going to ride the bus, and he's going to meet her. There's very detailed instructions that she wrote down, thankfully, because this was a little bit that they were able to have. That's how we know a lot of this information is from these notes that she took. So she actually has one of her 4 brothers, I believe it was the youngest one. He walks with her to the bus stop. So he's the last person to ever see her. He watches her get onto the bus, board the bus by herself. Everything seemed fine. Of course, so we're clear, the consideration was she a potential runaway? And there is not a soul in the world who even thought that that was a possibility. She had nothing to run away from, and that wasn't in any way where her headspace was. She was excited to get $40 to buy clothes. She wasn't in this like wanting to get away and start a new life. She was excited. She was in a great mood. So her brother says she gets onto the bus and he watches her drive off. It is reported that she got off the bus around 9 a.m. on Washington Street, and she was literally right next to where she needed to be, which is the corner of High and Mill Street. When she had talked to the man on the phone, John Marshall had told her that he or his wife would meet her at this corner and that they would be in a red Volkswagen. And so she's to look for a red Volkswagen. It'll be one of them, and then they would drive her to his house. So she didn't have to worry about anything. She just had to ride the bus to get there. Which I've seen this said many times. It's really weird. If you can drive to the bus stop, why couldn't they drive the 7 miles to just pick her up, meet her parents, all of these things that we think about after the fact, but at the time it seemed totally normal to them. So she's going to get picked up. Now, it is reported that a witness did see her. There was a woman who saw her on the bus, and then there was someone else who saw her outside of the bus and saw her walk up to a red sports car. You're like, whoa, is that it? She's talking to a man inside this red sports car. I'm going to go ahead and clear that one out for you. That was not him. This man was cleared. It appeared that she mistaked this sports car for a Volkswagen and had went up to the man, and it was not him. This man was not involved. Nobody actually saw her get in the car or walk away from the car, but that man was cleared. Now, again, there was also the woman on the bus, but she didn't have any further information. She was just riding the bus, and she had her little girl with her, and her little girl had reached up and grabbed Margaret's hair, and Margaret apparently turned around and just chatted and was like totally sweet. It was just this like lovely little girl. And that's when she said her eyes were smiling because she was so excited. She thought she was landing like the job of the year, of the century for a little girl. Like this was a massive deal and she was so happy. So that lady didn't have any further information. And unfortunately, nobody had any information on her. Nobody saw which way she went. Nobody saw her get picked up. This just never. Nobody knew anything. Now, Margaret's mother, Mary, was expecting a phone call from Margaret. She had told Margaret, when you get to the marshal's home, please call me. And she didn't get that phone call. And she was worried, but it must have been something that wasn't out of the ordinary for Margaret to forget, because she was worried, but she wasn't panicked, and assumed that Margaret got to the house, started playing with the little boy, and was busy. So she was worried, but also was willing to accept that she must have forgotten to call her. Now, Margaret was supposed to be home at 2:30. The marshals were supposed to give her a ride home. When she didn't arrive home at 2:30, Mary's in a panic. Where's my daughter? What is going on? Like, things aren't making sense. So at this time, she grabs the phone and she calls the phone number that they had for John Marshall. A woman picks up and says, like, there's nobody here by that name. What are you talking about? And hangs up. And then she's calling and calling. This phone is ringing and ringing and ringing. And apparently someone else picks up. It's not the same person. She's like, I'm looking for my daughter. And that's when the person on the other line is like, do you realize you're calling a payphone outside of the A&P grocery store? And I think that's when it hit. Like, what in the hell is going on? Where's my daughter? It just panic. I can't imagine that moment of fear that they were feeling. But that's when she realizes that this man's not legit. Now, at this time, her husband takes off to Mount Holly. Like, he's going to go look for her. Like, she's got to have just gotten off the bus and gotten confused. Like, something's not right, but she's got to be okay. So he goes that way to go and look for her. And her mom pulls out the phone book. And phone books, back in the day, they're this thick. You open that phone book and starts calling every single John Marshall she can find. She is just searching, trying to find her daughter. Like, where did this person come from? Where's Margaret? Now, that payphone was actually outside of the A&P, and it's at a supermarket, and it was a mile south of where she was dropped off. And it was actually in the city of Lumberton. So again, when I say they were going to another city, like, they're all these little close little towns maybe right next to each other. And so that's where the payphone was at. She got dropped off in Mount Holly, and nobody knows, where is she? Why this payphone? Like, what is the connection and where is she at? Her parents obviously can't find her. And by 12:30 that night, she was officially considered a missing person, and police were on the case and out and searching for her. The detective that was handling the case rode the bus the next day, like immediately rode the bus the next day. He's looking for patrons who ride it on a regular basis. And that's when he starts getting all of this information, trying to find. And the one thing is that he was frustrated, and he was always frustrated with this case. I think he retired 14 years later, and he was still frustrated with this case. He felt like people wouldn't talk. I'm not sure where that feeling came from. I don't know that area of town well enough. At that time, what was it like? Because I can't imagine why people weren't cooperating. I think it was more people weren't paying attention. I don't think that people didn't want to cooperate, unless he knows more, and obviously he does. But I feel like back then, I say it all the time, that people weren't paying attention. It wasn't like it is now. I remember being a kid. I remember running a classified for yard sales when we were kids. I remember doing this, putting our address. I remember when we would graduate that we would get announcements in the newspaper, and it would have our full name. I remember when I was born, in the newspaper, everything, address and everything. This is how it was, and it was totally acceptable. It's because I was born in the 70s, but hey. But then I do remember that as I got older, like booking babysitting jobs, my mom was really, really cautious. And I remember hearing stories, and I don't know if I heard Margaret's story exactly, but because this sounds so familiar. And I remember knowing that things were changing. We didn't have pagers yet, we didn't have cell phones, but when I would go to babysit, it was just a lot more strict. And I remember thinking, God, Mom, calm down. Thanks, Mom. Now, so let's consider that payphone, because obviously this person was using this payphone in order to make contact. We know we can't go look at surveillance video because that didn't happen back then. So why? The first thought would be, does this person live and work in the area? Are they familiar with this payphone? So they started looking at every John Marshall, and lo and behold, the assistant manager of the A&P supermarket is Jack or John Marshall. I am so confused on that. But anyways, it's John Marshall, Jack Marshall, and Jack is often common for John, whatever it is. This person is the assistant manager of this grocery store. It makes you really wonder, what? Is this possible? Is this him? Apparently that man was cleared. One of the things that was said originally is that because he knew the police officer, that they're like, oh yeah, he's a good guy. He didn't do it. Don't worry about him. But I guess there was more. Obviously, there was more. Eventually, the FBI got involved. More was done, and he was cleared. He had an alibi. He was not involved. And it always makes you wonder, was the real guy who really took her, was he possibly an employee there? Did he visit that store often? So many questions about why he used that name. Obviously, there was John Marshall, who was a former chief of the United States. So there is that consideration. There were a lot of schools and buildings in the area named after John Marshall. So he could have just been taking the name from there. But they obviously had to look into every John Marshall in the area to see if there was any connection. And it was really weird that there was one that worked at that store, and people are still very uncomfortable with him, but it appears that he has been 100% cleared of any involvement in the disappearance of Margaret. And since it's 1974, it's really hard to find anything different than that. There was also a registered sex offender in the area who did own and drive a red Volkswagen. This man was looked into extensively, and eventually he was cleared. He was a ham radio operator, and therefore they could use his logbooks. I did a little research. I saw the research in the Reddit thread, which I dropped down below for you guys, which did validate what I found. And just so in case you don't know, ham radio, CB radio, totally different. Ham radio does require a license, and it is completely tracked. So it's not just like I talked to @Melissa at 12 o'clock and I wrote it down in my spiral notebook. It's very seriously tracked logs that can be checked. So they did verify his alibi, and he was on his ham radio working, talking directly to someone at the time that she disappeared. So his alibi is as strong as it possibly can be. I'm also going to refer back to my very first video on Ted Bundy where I said the same thing. This was a big reason why Ted Bundy got away with what he did for so long. At the time, police departments did not communicate with each other. There wasn't a way for them to easily do it. You had to call someone and talk them into sending you something. And it's not that they didn't care, but it was a lot of work to put it together, to even make copies and all these things in order to send a fax over. It wasn't as quick and as easy as it is now. You didn't just drop it in and go and spit out a print. It was a lot more work. And so police departments didn't really want to share with each other because it took a lot of effort. And so this is obviously going to affect this case. It did. There's no way it didn't, because getting this information, we also didn't have news cycles that ran all day long. You know, there was like the 5 o'clock news and the 6 a.m. news. And if you didn't catch it, you didn't know the news. You had to verify that you got the newspaper. There wasn't a free online Google. And so you didn't have access to this information. So it just makes you wonder how much didn't get out there and how much did people not know, and they couldn't help. Now, police obviously think ahead, and they do go ahead and put wiretaps to record any incoming phone calls that do come into the home. They are waiting to see if they do get a ransom request. And on June 28th, Mary, Margaret's mother, did get a phone call. And I'm going to play the phone call for you guys. I want you to know something, though. This is a privilege for us, because you're just finding out about the case and you get to hear this phone call. Everyone else had to wait 45 years. Okay, 45 years of her missing for this phone call to be released. A very long time for them not to release the phone call. And the thing is that it was explained that the quality of it, and so now I'm curious, how much did they have to edit it, or maybe they just couldn't get it in a format. But I'm like, we've been like coding computers since 2000. Anyways, that's my little ramble on like, I can't believe they didn't release this until 2019 and what. So I'm going to play it for you guys. It's weird. Let me play it for you.
$10,000 might be a lot of bread, but your daughter's life is the butter topping.
Who is it?
$10,000 might be a lot of bread, but your daughter's life is the butter topping.
Who is it?
Uncomfortable. Have you heard that phrasing before? Buttered topping? This is like the conversation that comes up. So then I had to Google it, and like, I don't know. I've never heard anyone refer to that. And I heard it on another podcast. Somebody said, I grew up in a home that had white bread on the table with a cube of butter, and you buttered your bread with every meal. And we've never referred to that either. I've never heard anyone say butter topping. So it's an interesting phrasing, and it always just makes you wonder, where is this person from? Like, where did that come from? Now, the next day, her family, the Fox family, did receive a letter. And in this letter, it asked for them to drop the money into a box and wrap it in blue wrapping paper like her shirt. Now, at the time, her shirt color had been released, so they could have used it from that. This is 2 days after she's been reported. The first day she gets reported to the news, and then they get the phone call, and then the next day they get the letter. And also in the letter, it mentioned that we didn't harm her. We only tore her shirt and broke her glasses. That was concerning because she wasn't wearing her glasses in any of the photos. And they don't recall mentioning that she wore glasses, but they knew she had her glasses with her. So that always kind of was concerning, like, maybe this is true. Now, her family went and took out the $10,000 immediately, which is also interesting because $10,000 in 1974 is the equivalent to almost $60,000. So not a lot of families have $60,000 in liquid assets to pull out of the bank. I don't have $60,000. Don't ask me for ransom, please. I don't. So her father was also a plumber who did side jobs, like maybe helping renovate homes. But this wasn't somebody that you would expect to just have the equivalent of $60,000 available in the bank for withdrawal. But they did. And they went and got the $10,000 and withdrew it. And they waited for instructions. Before I forget, they did get fingerprints off of this letter. They ran them in the area. That's about it. What they can do, they can cross-check with the military, the police officers. That's about it. And unfortunately, in 2017, those fingerprints were lost. So we don't have a lot of information. Did they ever run them again? You would assume. This case has been classified as cold because there is 0 leads to go on. But it is also a case that is very near and dear to the community. So it's not forgotten in any way, shape, or form. If they had anything to go with, they would jump right on it. So I'm kind of confused how these fingerprints got lost. And weren't they ever loaded into CODIS? Like, I have so many questions about these fingerprints. On top of that, so since we're on the topic of losing things, her dental records were also lost, making it very difficult because eventually there was a girl who was found in a well that they wanted to match with her. And it took years and years. I think it took almost 10 years to verify that it wasn't Margaret, using familiar DNA that they could have just done if somebody hadn't lost her dental records. Now, on June 30th, the family received another letter. And this letter said $10,000 was a lot of bread, but your daughter's life was the butter topping. And it was changed. The wording was changed. It was very specific, and said that the exchange of the ransom was off, and said that the parents had goofed. I have no idea what happened, why they thought this. And it just so questioned, was this ever legit? The FBI does believe that this phone call was legit. Okay. So they put this out. They don't, whether or not the letters are linked, how can it not be? Because then the letter was also signed. Let me give you this. It was signed with the words "so long again." And the S, the L, and the A were highlighted. This seemed to be in reference to the SLA, which was the initials of the Sudanese Libertarian Army. I said that wrong. Sudanese Liberation Army. And they were a terrorist organization that were famous for kidnapping Patty Hearst earlier that year. So was this, they already researched it, and the SLA was not active in this area at all at the time. It didn't seem to fit. They couldn't imagine why they would have done this. So was it attention? Was it just trying to put blame? Was it getting them notoriety? Were they really responsible? It really makes you ask a lot of questions because maybe, but it didn't seem to fit, and police seem to think that that's not what happened. And these people are not involved. And why was that letter signed that way? Was it on purpose? Was he trying to say something else? Nobody knows, okay? That's where it's at. It's where it landed at. And they have no information. So I've been thinking, and I don't typically do a lot of work on serial killers. I'm fascinated with serial killers and understanding what makes them tick, but presenting it to you guys doesn't interest me as much because usually they're solved, and I always feel like serial killers stories, you lose sight of the victims. And that's what I care about. So it always makes it a little weird for me. Anyways, I'm going to do a series on serial killers, but it's going to be like for Halloween or something because it's just not my normal thing. Anyways, I'm curious if you guys know like who was active this time, who was active in this area, who would be responsible. We've had this happen. We've had the Craigslist killer. We've had the want ad killer, the Lovely Hearts killers. Like there's a bunch of them. I don't know all of them. I mostly got this for my research. So I know there's a bunch out there and I know this happens, but I'm kind of curious like who was active in the area, who could have possibly been in the New Jersey area preying on young girls in the 1970s. You have to remember, Ted Bundy literally had just started his spree in the 1970s. So this was all very, very new. Serial killers were getting away with harming victims all the time. And this fits the MO. Police have said at this point, it's very hard to know whether or not if Margaret had survived being kidnapped and she was held, she would be 60 now. What would stop her from coming forward? Who would hold someone that long? So they have long presumed that she probably didn't last more than a couple hours when she was taken. And her body needs to be found so she can go home, so she can be buried with her parents. That would also mean the abductor would at least be 80 to 90 years old. So it makes you wonder, is that person around? And this is the time, if you know anything, for someone to come forward. Someone to come forward so that they can find her body, so they can return, so they can know what happened. Unfortunately, both of Margaret's parents have passed away, and they were not around to know what happened. And never will they get that answer of where is she. And her brothers appear that I believe all of them are still alive and around. They remain silent. I'm not adding any photos of them in any way, shape, or form. There's not even a lot of photos to add. But I'm not adding, it seems that they would like to live their life privately. This was probably traumatic. Then after 45 years, there's nothing you can do. You can't get any answers, unless you have a police department or a private investigator. They're the only ones that could possibly figure this out, or people like y'all. So maybe if you guys can think of anything. The FBI's Newark office is handling this case. They have included age progression photos, which is what I've been showing you guys this whole time. There's also a $25,000 reward. They're very invested in finding out what happened to Margaret. There's also the Burlington City Police Department. I will drop their information for you guys. And let me give you the exact information about her when she disappeared. And I did pull this from the Charlie Project. So she was 5'2" to 5'3" and 105 pounds. She was wearing a light blue long-sleeved floral-patterned blouse. It was squared at the top and then it flowed out at the bottom. She also had a black and white or a blue and white, they weren't really sure, checkered waist-length jacket. She was also wearing a 34B bra. She had a maroon flared jeans with yellow patch on one knee. She had brown sandals with a heel strap. She was wearing a gold necklace with flowers and a blue stone on it. I always think of this. If you guys don't follow the Jane Doe Project, please do. I've included the link to them as well. Please, the amount of unidentified people that are out there, the only way you figure it out is like little things like that, like their jewelry that they find, things that don't deteriorate over time. So yes, she was wearing a gold necklace with flowers and a blue stone and a gold charm bracelet with a round blue stone. So both of these had blue stones on it. And she was carrying a brown bag and an eyeglass case with a Huckleberry Hound design. And I will pop up that for you guys. She had brown hair, blue eyes. At the time of her disappearance, she also still had freckles. And well, she might have kept her freckles, but kids often have freckles. And she was missing her 2 front right teeth. She also didn't have her glasses on at the time, but she did wear glasses and they were a gold trim. And they were also specific. They had a hexagonal frame and they had a broken off temple and the nose pieces. So a little bit of things to let you know about the glasses. I pointed my nose when I said temple, but you get what I mean. Okay, so there were all these characteristics about her, these little things that could be found somewhere one day that will identify back to Margaret. And that is what the hope is, that she can be found and returned back to her resting place with her family, or that she's out there and maybe she doesn't know. Maybe she somehow didn't know what was happening or was tricked or something and she's out there and somebody might recognize her. So that is the story I have for you guys today on Margaret Ellen Fox. So thank you. I don't know how to end my video. So are we getting it? I always go, and okay, bye. So thank you guys so much for being here with me. Again, drop your case suggestions down below for me. Follow me on Instagram. I'm Yeah, come chat with me on Instagram. I'm trying to get better at posting on there. I just don't know what to post. I don't want to post as many pictures of my kids anymore because I'm trying to be safe, internet safety. So now I don't have anything to post. I'm not really a selfie girl. Sorry. But I could post something. But come talk to me. I'm over on Instagram. That's where I'm normally at. So, and I will also post my Facebook group for you guys down below. So thank you guys so much for being here with me. I'm going to get this edited and work on the next video. I have some this week to like crank videos for you guys to get caught up. So thank you so much for being here. I say this at the end of every one of my videos. Hug your babies and hug your loves. Life is literally precious. Enjoy every minute of every day. I love you guys. Don't take anything for granted. I'm getting tired. I love you guys. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.